The notification lit up my screen at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was from James. My father. Family dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Sharp. Important discussion. Don't be late. I stared at the phone, a cold, humorless smile touching my lips. It had been 8 months since I'd heard a single word from any of them. 8 months since the day I walked across the graduation stage alone, searching the crowd for parents who never showed up. They had been too busy then. But now, suddenly, there was an important discussion. I didn't reply. I just grabbed my keys. I knew exactly what this was about. Before I tell you what I brought to that dinner, to drop a comment and let me know. What's the longest you've ever gone without speaking to a family member? I want to see if I'm the only one who knows how loud that silence can get. I didn't take my own car. Driving a luxury SUV to a family dinner was a tactical error I wasn't willing to make. It would announce my success before I was ready to weaponize it. Instead, I rented a mid-range sedan, gray, unassuming, forgettable, the perfect camouflage. As I drove up the winding road to the estate, the sun was setting over the valley, painting the vines in shades of burnt orange and gold. From a distance, it looked idyllic, the picture of old money and generational stability. But as I got closer, the cracks began to show. The white paint on the main gate was peeling, revealing rusted iron beneath. The long driveway was dusting and unpaved in sections where the gravel had thinned out, and the vines themselves, I knew enough about agriculture now to see the signs. The leaves were brittle, the growth stunted. This wasn't just a dry season, this was systemic neglect. The vineyard wasn't thriving, it was dying. My father wasn't inviting me back because he missed me. He was inviting me back because he needed something. Parking at the far end of the circular drive, away from the other cars, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No makeup to hide behind, no flashy jewelry, just me. I wasn't the daughter returning to beg for approval anymore. I was a CEO entering a hostile acquisition meeting. And in that moment, I realized something that made the knot in my stomach loosen just a fraction. For my entire life, I had viewed my family through the lens of emotion, love, rejection, hurt, longing. But that was the wrong framework. They didn't operate on emotion, they operated on investment. In their eyes, I had been a low-yield asset. Quiet, studious, independent. I didn't bring them social capital like my beauty queen sister Olivia or my charming brother Joshua. I didn't offer a quick return on their attention, so they stopped investing. It wasn't personal cruelty. It was just bad business strategy. They had divested from me because they didn't see my potential. But now the market had shifted. The asset they discarded had appreciated beyond their wildest comprehension, and their own portfolio was crashing. They were desperate investors trying to buy back in after the IPO. Understanding this didn't make the pain vanish, but it gave me armor. I wasn't walking into a family reunion. I was walking into a negotiation with people who had already lost their leverage. Leather portfolio in hand, I stepped out into the cooling evening air and walked toward the front door. I didn't knock. I just walked in. The dining room smelled of expensive roast beef and stale ambition. My mother, Angela, rushed forward the moment I entered, arms outstretched as if she hadn't spent the last 8 months pretending I didn't exist. Jasmine! Oh, look at you. We missed you so much, darling. Her embrace was performative light, quick, designed for an audience that wasn't there. I didn't hug back. I just let her bounce off my stillness. You look tired, Olivia said from her seat, swirling her wine glass. Is that hotel job running you ragged? It was her classic move, a compliment wrapped in a razor blade. She wanted me to be struggling. She needed me to be struggling. Because if I wasn't, then her own faltering influencer career looked even worse by comparison. Something like that, I said, taking my seat. I didn't correct her. I didn't mention the global awards my resorts had just won or the magazine cover I'd been asked to shoot next month. I let them keep their comfortable delusions for a few minutes longer. The table was set with the good china, the pieces they usually reserved for investors or local politicians. My father, James, sat at the head of the table, looking every inch the benevolent patriarch, though I noticed the fraying cuffs on his shirt. He raised his glass. To family. To being together again. We clinked glasses. The crystal chimed, a hollow sound in the large room. As I took a sip of water, my mother launched into a monologue about the upcoming charity gala, carefully avoiding asking me a single question about my life. "We missed you," she said again, almost as an afterthought. I looked at the empty chair next to me. In my mind, it wasn't empty. I saw a ghost sitting there. My 22-year-old self, wearing a cap and gown, checking her phone every 30 seconds in a crowded auditorium, waiting for a text that said, "We're here." It never came. I remembered the burning sensation in my throat as I walked across the stage to polite applause from strangers, knowing my family was at a more important event, my brother's truck purchase celebration. That ghost girl looked back at me now, eyes red-rimmed and pleading. She wanted them to love her. She wanted to be good enough. I felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it almost took my breath away. I wasn't here for their approval. I was here to avenge her. I was here to make sure that girl never had to beg for scraps again. I set my glass down with a deliberate click. The sound cut through my mother's chatter. "Dad," I said, my voice calm and level. "Your text said this was urgent. Let's skip the small talk. Why am I really here?" The pleasantries evaporated instantly. James leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He didn't look desperate. He looked entitled. That was the trick of men like my father. They could be standing on a sinking ship and still demand you salute them. "We have a situation," he began, swirling his wine. "A temporary liquidity issue. The drought has hit the valley hard. Production is down, and the bank is being unreasonable." He paused, waiting for my sympathy. When I offered none, he cleared his throat. "There is a solution. The Silver Creek estate next door is being auctioned. Specifically, their water rights. If we secure those rights, we secure the future of this family. We can irrigate, expand, and dominate the region." "And?" I asked. "And we need capital," Uncle Robert interjected, his voice oily. "To secure the bid and the land, we need $1 million. Liquid. Immediately. $1 million. They said it so casually, as if asking for someone to pass the salt. They weren't asking for a loan. They were demanding a tribute. "We know you've done well enough with your little hotels," my father continued, his tone dismissive. "It's time you contributed to the legacy that actually matters. This vineyard has been in our family for 3 generations. It is your duty, Jasmine, to ensure it sees a fourth." "Duty," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Don't look so shocked," Olivia sneered, picking at her salad. "It's not like you earned that money in a vacuum. You have Dad's business sense. You have the connections our name gave you. You owe this family." "Exactly," Robert added, leaning in. "You come from good stock, Jasmine. Your success is a byproduct of this family's genes. It's only right that the dividends return to the source. Think of it as paying your dues." I looked around the table. They weren't asking. They were collecting. They genuinely believed that my success, my sleepless nights, my risks, my relentless grind to build an eco-resort empire from scratch was actually theirs. They viewed my bank account as a satellite office of their own failed enterprise. They mocked my business as a cute hobby in the same breath they demanded it save their serious legacy. I glanced at the center of the table. Sitting there, unopened and ignored among the heavy serving platters, was the bottle of wine I had brought as a gift. It was a vintage, red, dark, and dusty. I had placed it there when I walked in, and not one of them had bothered to look at the label. If they had, the blood would have drained from their faces right then and there, but they were too busy looking at my wallet to look at my warning. "So," James said, clasping his hands, "we'll need the transfer initiated by tomorrow morning. The auction for the water rights closed privately 2 days ago, but the winner hasn't been announced. We need the funds ready to make a counteroffer to whoever bought it. We're going to bully them out of the sale." "Bully them out of the sale," I said softly. "That's your plan?" "It's business, Jasmine," he said, smiling condescendingly. You play hardball, or you lose. You'll learn that eventually. I see, I said. You're right. Business is business. I reached down and picked up my leather portfolio. I didn't reach for my checkbook. I reached for the truth. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corners of my mouth, though I hadn't eaten a bite. Then I placed it on the table. The white linen settled with a soft sigh that seemed deafening in the sudden quiet. I reached for the leather portfolio on the floor beside me. The zipper hissed as I opened it, a sound like a blade being drawn. You're right, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Business is business. And in business, before one invests a single cent, one conducts due diligence. So, I did. The first stack of papers slid across the polished mahogany toward Uncle Robert. He looked down, and his smug expression fractured. It was a forensic audit of his financial management over the last 5 years. You said the bank was being unreasonable, I continued, smoothing the paper with my hand. But according to these filings, the bank has been incredibly patient. You've leveraged this estate 3 times to cover bad investments in cryptocurrency and offshore gambling debts. You're not liquid, Robert. You're insolvent. That's private information, Robert sputtered, reaching to cover the documents. Where did you get this? Public records and a very good private investigator, I replied calmly. You don't need $1 million for water rights. You need it to pay off the balloon payment on the second mortgage that Dad doesn't know you took out. My father's head whipped around to look at his brother. I didn't let them argue. I wasn't done. The second stack of documents hit the table next, glossy, high-definition brochures and financial statements bound in heavy cardstock. I placed them in the center, directly over the untouched appetizers. And, regarding my little hotel job, I said, looking at Olivia, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I flipped open the brochure. It featured a sweeping aerial shot of a cliffside resort in Bali, architectural marvels woven into the jungle canopy. The logo was embossed in gold. The Jasmine Collective. I don't work for a hotel chain, I said. I own the chain. 12 luxury eco-resorts across 4 continents. We specialize in sustainable luxury and high-net-worth privacy. I slid the valuation report toward my father. His eyes scanned the bottom line, widening until I thought they might pop. Last quarter, my company was valued at $56.5 million, I stated, the numbers rolling off my tongue with cool precision. I didn't get there because of your name, Dad. In fact, I built it under a shell company so no one would associate my brand with your failing reputation. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. Joshua looked at me as if I had just grown a second head. Olivia was staring at the brochure, her mouth slightly open, realizing the cute hobby she'd mocked was an empire she could never afford to visit. So, no, I said, closing the portfolio. I won't be investing in this vineyard. Not because I can't afford it, but because I don't invest in sinking ships. And I certainly don't pay dividends on good genes that never taught me anything other than how to survive neglect. Wait, James said, his voice trembling slightly. He wasn't angry anymore. He was panicked. The bluster had deflated, leaving behind a desperate old man. Jasmine, be reasonable. 56 million? If you have that kind of capital, then 1 million is nothing to you. It's pocket change. We're talking about saving the family land. If we don't get those water rights, the vines die. The legacy dies. I know, I said. That's why I didn't come here to invest. I reached for the bottle of wine sitting in the center of the table, the one I had brought. The one they had ignored. I picked it up and held it out to my father. Read the label. Dad. He took it, confused. He squinted at the elegant calligraphy on the front. Silver Creek Estate. Reserve Cabernet. 2018. He looked up, bewildered. I don't understand. This is from next door. Why are you showing me this? Keep reading, I said. Look at the bottom. The proprietor's name. He looked closer. His breath hitched. The bottle slipped from his fingers and hit the table with a heavy thud. though it didn't break. He stared at me, his face draining of color. Proprietor, J. Jasmine? He whispered. I didn't come here to help you bid on Silver Creek, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold wind. I bought Silver Creek. 2 days ago. $41 million, cash. You bought it? Angela gasped, clutching her pearls. You own the water? I own the land. I own the vines. And yes, most importantly, I own the senior water rights for this entire valley, I confirmed. The auction you were planning to bully your way into? It never happened. I made a preemptive offer they couldn't refuse. I watched the realization hit them like a physical blow. I wasn't just a rich daughter they could guilt trip. I was their neighbor. I was their competition, and I held the only resource that could keep them alive. But why? Olivia asked, her voice shrill. Why would you buy that dump next door? Do you remember where I wanted my graduation party, Olivia? I asked. She blinked. What? 8 years ago, I said. I begged Mom and Dad to let me have a small party at the Silver Creek barn. It was beautiful, it was simple, and you told me, Dad, that it was too expensive for a party nobody would come to. You said we couldn't afford to waste money on my vanity. I leaned forward. I bought it because I could, and because now I own the venue where you refused to celebrate me. I own the memory you tried to ruin. The room was silent. The power had shifted so completely that the air felt thin. They weren't looking at a family member anymore. They were looking at the landlord of their fate. So, James said, his voice cracking. The transformation was complete. The arrogant patriarch had dissolved, replaced by a beggar in a tailored suit. You control the water. Then, we can work this out. A family rate. An easement. You can divert the flow to our irrigation channels. We can pay you back over time. Please, Jasmine, Angela added, tears finally spilling over real tears this time, fueled by the terrifying prospect of poverty. We made mistakes. We admit that. But you can't just let the vineyard die. It's your home. I looked at them, huddling together in the wreckage of their own ego. They still thought this was a negotiation. They still thought there was a price tag on my compliance. I'm afraid that doesn't fit my business model, I said, zipping up my portfolio. The Jasmine Collective is built on sustainability. My plan for Silver Creek isn't agriculture, it's restoration. I'm rewilding the stream. I'm taking down the dams and letting the water flow back into the natural ecosystem. But, Joshua stammered, his face pale, if you don't divert the water to us, our vines will dry out in a month. Yes, I said simply. They will. You're destroying us. Uncle Robert shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You're bankrupting your own flesh and blood. No, I corrected him, turning toward the door. I'm just declining to subsidize a failing business. You taught me that, Dad. Never throw good money after bad. And frankly, your vineyard is a very bad investment. I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, the shouting started, Dad yelling at Robert, Olivia sobbing, Angela calling my name. It sounded like a riot in a library. I walked through the foyer, past the portraits of ancestors who would have been ashamed of them, and opened the heavy oak door. The night air was cool and clean. I walked to my rental car, got in, and started the engine. As I pulled down the driveway, my phone on the passenger seat lit up. Dad calling, Mom calling, text from Olivia, you bitch. Text from Robert, we can sue. I didn't block them. I just turned the phone face down. I waited for the surge of triumph. I waited for the rush of adrenaline, the vindication, the gotcha moment I had fantasized about for years. But as I turned onto the main highway, leaving the dying vineyard in my rearview mirror, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing, and that was the greatest luxury of all. Hate requires energy. It requires you to care about the person hurting you. But I had moved past hate. I had reached the altitude of indifference. They were no longer monsters under my bed or giants I had to slay. They were just people. Small, bad at business, insignificant people who used to know me. I rolled down the window and let the wind rush in. I was driving toward my new estate, toward the water I owned, toward a future I had built with my own hands. The silence in the car wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. If you've ever had to outgrow people who were supposed to grow with you, share this story. And hit that subscribe button because next week, we're talking about what happens when they try to come crawling back.